Good morning and welcome. Patriot Radio News Hour. Joe and Jason on this Wednesday. Happy Juneteenth. Yes, it's the Juneteenth holiday. For those of you that didn't realize it, the banks are closed today. Wall Street's not open. I'm sure probably state and local governments, I'm sure some of those people were getting the day off as well. But the show must go on, and I'll tell you what, there is a lot to talk about, even with our markets closed. Remember, tomorrow we'll get jobless claims. All eyes on that. Is it going to be, that 240,000 plus people filing for unemployment for the first time, or is it kind of go back to the 220 we've been seeing as of late? If it stays higher, obviously, what do we expect, right? A weaker dollar, more chances of rate cuts. But we may have another bank imploding. We'll have to wait to find out when the markets reopen tomorrow. But it is not a U.S. bank. It is a Japanese bank. And again, size matters, and we find out once again our central bank has been bailing out other foreign banks, as we'll get into in a minute. But this is the problem with these guys. See, they don't want to tell us the truth. They want to hide everything, and, it's for the good of the system. That's why we don't tell you. We don't tell you about the 280 some odd U.S. banks that are probably going to fail, because then you take your money out. Oh my gosh, you may actually do something. No, we don't want you to do that. We don't want you to know that we are quietly pumping more liquidity into the system, even though we're trying to tell you we haven't been. See, and this is why. Now it kind of makes more sense as to why it is that this inflation won't go away, because they really haven't stopped printing the money. And by the way, the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, man, what a worthless. We should just stop. That would be like the first thing that should shut down, because they're only allowed to do what the Treasury and the Fed tell it to do. But they had a massive increase in the size of the debt. Now, all of a sudden, they had a come to Jesus meeting. Somebody gave them a calculator. I don't know what happened. But they've decided that I have been right all along, and the U.S. debt is going to be much bigger than what they've been telling everybody. Our toll-free number, 800-951-0592. The website at allamericangold.com. And, Jason, I told you, we got a lot of stuff to talk about.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it was 44 years ago, if I got that right. 44 years ago, that's when Ronald Reagan was elected. And you talk about massive debt, and under Ronald Reagan's first term, didn't they get to they got to $1 trillion in the national debt? I thought that was massive. I wasn't paying attention. I was too young to worry about that stuff, but wasn't that a massive debt? We got to come up with a better word for the debt we're dealing with now, because it was massive when it was $1 trillion in the 80s, Joe.
Well, the interesting thing is they come out with these ridiculous reports to begin with. And they were talking about the debt was going to be $1.5 trillion this year. Now, we're pretty much right there already, right? But they bumped it up. They bumped it up and said, you know what? Okay, how about $1.9 trillion? That's their new number. And here's the sad part. That number's not true. But, I mean, it's closer, right? We're getting a little closer. But when you think about, hey, we missed it by a little bit. We missed it by over 30%. And the realities are, Jason, they're going to be lucky that they don't miss it by 100%, because the deficit's going to be, we already know, north of $2 trillion. Now, the question is, how close to $2.5 trillion are we actually going to get? But it's something where we're starting to see, and we know that that they lied. I can't say they lie. They say, well, we're just doing the rules that we've been given, that old chestnut. But it's the amounts. It is how far from reality they really are. So now their new number for the next 10 years is $57 trillion for the U.S. debt. And I'm just going to tell you right now, a miracle would have to happen for our debt to only be $57 trillion 10 years from now. I mean, this would be something more than when Jesus himself turned water into wine. Right? We would need a bigger miracle than that for the debt to only be $57 trillion 10 years from today, because as we know, listen, we're already at $35 trillion. You're talking about them saying, well, we're only going to run about $2 trillion a year for the next 10 years. Just a little bit, just a tiny bit more. Listen, here's what I'm going to tell you. I'll be shocked if it's below 70. And that's just doing elementary math with a calculator. Patriot Radio News Hour. We'll be back after the break. 800-951-0592. Patriot Radio News Hour. Joe and Jason on this Wednesday. The markets, the U.S. stock market is closed today for the Juneteenth holiday. Pre-market, if that matters, has the Dow down 58 points heading into tomorrow. S&P up 3. The NASDAQ up 40. The 10-year note all the way down to 4.22. And I suspect it could get even lower than that. Gold is pretty flat here, down a couple of dollars, 23, 28. I think silver's up a penny. Platinum's up a few bucks. Not a lot going on today. I think tomorrow and Friday will be very, very active. But again, as we talk about being more diversified, and there's a lot of people out there, I get it, because I always say, hey, don't put all of your assets into gold and silver. And a lot of you are like, hey, that's the only place I feel comfortable. I get it. Just make sure you leave yourself enough money to pay your bills, right? That's the key, right? You got to have enough money in your bank accounts to pay your bills, but don't leave too much money in the banks. I keep telling you this. The rules are different this time. There's no bailout coming. You know why? Because they don't have any money. They can't bail it out. They could, I think they should just lift the curtain. Why don't we just go and say, insure up to $1 million, $10 million, unlimited insurance. But they only got $120 billion, the FDIC. That's all they got. That's not even a big bank. And that's J.P. Morgan Chase all by itself has like $2 trillion of insured deposits. I mean, what are you going to do? And this is why I keep telling you to stay more diversified than you've ever been. For those of you that got $50,000 or more, at least check out Y-Refi. Give them a call. You can get up to 10.25% fixed rates of return. It's not correlated to the stock market. And it's really a great thing, that they're doing. We don't need loan forgiveness. I just saw another article about the majority of Americans think you should be able to forgive medical debt. Let's just make everything free. Right? That doesn't work. That stuff doesn't work. And this is kind of the problem that we have, and everything costs so darn much that the middle class is getting obliterated. Why are Americans saying, yeah, forgive student loans, forgive this, forgive that, because we're getting destroyed. And when this bubble bursts, believe me, the last place you want to be is with too much money sitting in your bank accounts or completely exposed to Wall Street. Check out Y-Refi. Invest, YREFI.com. The word invest, the letter Y, REFY.com. Or just call them. That's probably the easiest thing to do. Just call them. 888-YREFI-24. So not only does the CBO, of course, when did they make this announcement? Oh, yeah, Tuesday after the markets close. Oh, by the way, hey, the national debt's going to be way bigger than what we said, right? It's going to be massive. It's going to be a record outside of the one COVID year. The problem is, I don't know if next year just may be a record, even without COVID. I mean, COVID, think about a record. You shut down the entire country. Think about, right, where they were paying everybody. I mean, everybody's getting free money. And we're talking about we're going to be running into that number and lapping that number, in the next, 18 months? It's hard to understand how we can be this idiotic. It's idiotic. Leaving interest rates at zero for 15 years was idiotic. This is why all these banks are going under. And of course, why is this news released today? Well, because the markets are closed. Japan banking giant. Now listen, my Japanese isn't very good. Norin Chusin. They call it, I'm going to call it NOCO for short. They are the 5th largest bank in Japan. They've got a little problem. Their problem is they bought way too many treasuries and are facing unprecedented losses. And they are now we didn't know this till today. I didn't know this till today. But they have a branch in New York. See these banks say, okay, we got a branch in the United States. They are now part of the standing repo facility for counterparties. In other words, our Federal Reserve has been bailing this bank out since December of last year. But guess what? It's not enough. They now announced that, by the way, they have $840 billion in assets. That would make this a top 10 bank here. This is not Silicon Valley, right? Silicon Valley, remember Silicon Valley? That was what? 170 billion. This is much bigger. Calling this maybe a canary in the coal mine, they, according to the Nikkei, Nochu Bank will sell more than 10 trillion yen. Now, I didn't know what 10 trillion yen was. So thankfully, the good old people that do this sort of stuff, they kind of let me know. 10 trillion yen, that's $63 billion that they will sell of its U.S. and European government bonds during the rest of this year through March of 2025 as it aims to try to stem losses from the low-yielding foreign bond markets, right? So, Jason, massive unrealized losses that now become realized losses. No bank, I don't care who you are, can withstand losses of this magnitude, to the fact that they now have to unload $63 billion, most of it U.S. Treasuries, as they try to prevent a bank run at the 5th largest bank in Japan, which would be one of the 10, 12 largest banks here in the U.S.
Yeah, it's with the interest rates coming up like they did to combat the inflation that they caused. This is what's caused the unrealized losses to start mounting, right, Joe? And we're seeing a turnover of $8 to $10 trillion in some of these things in the government and the treasuries, and you're talking also the real estate, the commercial loans, and this is going to be something, I believe, if the rates stay at any level above zero, that shouldn't end for several years, right? So they have to cycle all that low interest stuff out. And there's going to be a lot of victims, banks, businesses, otherwise, until they cycle all this into a higher interest debt. And quite frankly, if we go into if we're going into another 40-year cycle where prices get more expensive, things are moving up instead of bringing rates down for 30 or 40 years like they have been, 5% might be the low end on this thing, Joe. And these unrealized losses can happen over and over again over the course of even decades.
Well, the problem is when the unrealized loss becomes a realized loss. And this is what is happening to No-Chew today. They're going to lose 1.5 trillion yen in this. So you're talking about a $7 billion loss. That's unheard of. But again, it just tells you the scope of the problem. They're going to sell $63 billion worth of Tier 1. You got to remember, these are Tier 1 capital. Who knows what these guys have in Tier 2, Tier 3, right? The lower stuff. This is supposed to be the best of the best. You're talking losses of over 10%. That's insanity. Remember the financial crisis, just to give you an idea. You know how many people really lost their house? The number was big, but it was like 3%, 4%. That was it. This is double-digit losses on what our banking industry says was the best assets for these banks to own. And so when you're talking about selling these low-yield bonds when yields are no longer low, Jason, I don't think people really understand the size of the losses that these banks are facing. And this is why we keep telling you. There's a big tidal wave of bank failures coming here in the United States, and everybody better get ready because the problem is it's not just here. Look, remember Credit Suisse? No one wants to talk about that. That just quietly went away, right? They went under. Now we got the same thing happening here in Japan. And Jason, this slow mover, and I know it's slow, but it's picking up steam. The problem is we don't get to hear about it until after the fact. Why didn't we know that our Federal Reserve had been bailing this bank? How many other banks are they bailing? That's the thing, Jason. How many more No-Chews are there? Right? How many more are there? Are they bailing out their fourth largest bank, the third largest bank, the first largest bank? How many banks in Europe are they bailing out? Jason, we don't have the answer to any of those.
No, I don't think we really have the answers to a lot of things. Remember, when we do get data, it's lagging data. We don't get the data up to date. We're living in the computer age. We live in the technological age. Information's instantaneous. But I guess not when it comes to economic numbers and honest economic numbers, Joe. So like I said a minute ago, I believe the unrealized losses turning into realized losses like you're talking about, I don't think that's going to be a 2024 and 2025 problem. I think it's year after year after year. Because even if some of these entities get right with the 5% Fed rate, what if it goes to 8, 9, or 10? And what if it goes there and stays there for a while? Well, then we're going to have a whole other batch of unrealized losses turning into realized losses, Joe. I think this is something that we're just seeing the very beginning of. The years to come I think are going to be very devastating, Joe, when it comes to exactly what you're talking about.
Well, and again, right on cue, the Bank of Japan is now saying that No-Chew alone holds about 20% of foreign, what they're calling foreign bonds, most of them U.S. bonds, and saying that once they begin selling, others are going to have to join the club. So this is kind of the problem. And No-Chew said, hey, the rate cuts that we thought were supposed to happen aren't materializing. We're not going to, and even now, right, we're talking about, hey, we're going to get 1 or 2 rate cuts. That wasn't enough. That's not enough to save them. And that's what Nochu was saying is, hey, we just got to turn these into realized losses because it only gets worse the longer we wait. And the realities are, Jason, they needed the Fed's funds rate to be like 3%. And we're at almost 5.5%. And we're going to finish the year between 5 and 5.25 at best. And so here we go. Here it comes now. And how many other banks are going to be forced to do what they've done? Because once they start selling, other banks start selling. And again, here's the other thing we haven't talked about. That's more U.S. debt that's got to get bought up. This was U.S. debt that they didn't plan on hitting the market, another $63 billion, right? Well, guess what? Here it comes. Patriot Radio News Hour. We'll be back after the break. Told you we had a lot to talk about. 800-951-0592. So 2 big developments, I guess, on the Juneteenth holiday. Japan's 5th largest bank, and by the way, there are 5 top banks. They're all good size. You know, they're all around this size. Has announced massive unrealized losses that are now going to be realized losses, over $7 billion in losses, as they are going to be unloading massive amounts of U.S. treasuries to I guess, try to stem the flow here. The problem will be how many other banks will need to follow, on top of how many other banks has the Fed been bailing out that we aren't aware of. And then we look at Wall Street. It's been a good rally. Can't deny it. Very top-heavy. 5 companies now make up, and I don't know, I don't have the up-to-date number because this is a couple of days old, but close to now 65% of all the gains in 5 companies. That's it. Who are they? You know them. Microsoft, NVIDIA, Google, Amazon, Meta. Those are the 5 that account for most of the gains. Matter of fact, NVIDIA is now the largest company in the world. They have passed. Just think about the rise of this company has been incredible. They passed Apple yesterday. They passed Microsoft. By the way, they've now been giving a 21% rating equal to Microsoft now. This is how heavily weighted. These stocks are so heavily weighted. Jason, they really take out all the other stocks of the S&P 500, the other 495 stocks that are left. Hardly add anything to the gains that we're seeing, and now with the new weighting for NVIDIA, it's even less. Right now, we're going to be even more reliant upon these 5 companies to carry all this water, and that's always a dangerous place, right? Because sooner or later, when that bubble bursts, you really have a lot of losses underneath it. Because most people, listen, where's your money? Right. Well, it's in 401ks. It's in IRAs, right? You're not Warren Buffett, who obviously keeps all of his money not in the banks, but he owns 5 or 10 stocks. That's it. That's not how your 401ks work. That's not how your IRAs work. And Jason, I think a lot of people are going to already, here's what we know. You're not getting all of the gain that Wall Street's had this year. You're not, because unless you can only own those 5 stocks, you're not getting that. But the problem is, when that bubble burst, you're gonna actually do worse than what the market's going to do. If the S&P goes down 30%, you're probably going to lose 40 or 50%. Heck, if it goes down 50%, you're going to lose more than that. And Jason, it's just such a dangerous place to have just these. It was 7 stocks, right? And now they're saying these 5. And I got a funny feeling if you threw Netflix in there. Because Tesla's out, right? They've had a tough year. But if you put Netflix in there, those 6 companies would probably be, 75% of all the gains for Wall Street this year?
It was 2 years ago when the small and mid caps were hemorrhaging and not doing well. Remember, Joe, it's been 2 years since those small and mid caps were doing nothing or poorly performing. And so here we are in 2024, and you're talking just about a handful of stocks are the only things that are working. Yes, you're going to be looking really bad if you're so-called diversified in stocks and you have anything in underperforming stuff for the last 2 years, and then it's going to get completely eviscerated when the big ones start to take a hit. And I don't know when that'll happen, when the stock markets will take a massive hit, but when it goes, Joe, it's going to be severe. We're going to see some extraordinary things the next few years.
I think what we're going to see, and you're starting to see a lot of people talk now about corporate defaults that are coming, and we're already at the highest levels, going back to when everything shut down, going back to the financial crisis. There's a lot of corporate bankruptcies that the market they're anticipating we're going to see over the next 12 to 18 months. And those are going to be, the 495 other companies, right? That's kind of what they're talking about is, hey, these other companies that aren't AI, right? Get ready for a wave of defaults. And again, I think it's why we're going to talk about how much pressure are we really going to see in the banking industry as this thing unfolds.
Yeah, there will be a severe problem, Joe. We've been talking about how this has been a slow crash. It's been a slow developing situation. And gold doesn't take a big jump like it did a few months ago because times are getting better. And the thing that's going to be so devastating this time around, Joe, is the last generation of stock market hits, the dot-com bubble. You can even go to even 87, the 87 crash, the 08 housing crash. None of those had the massive inflation we have now, inflation that doesn't look to be cured. So, Joe, remember, I've said, we've talked about in the past, when the stock market crash of 29 happened, you didn't get the markets back. The S&P didn't get back to its levels for 28 years. And then 1968, the market started dipping down. Then the inflation came in. The stuff that we're looking at kind of now, markets didn't come back for 25 years. So, Joe, whatever highs that the markets got to this year, when it goes, this may not be one of those curable situations that we saw with these other market crashes where things just bounce back. Certainly won't be like what happened with COVID when it took a massive hit and then just bounced like a ball back because of all the liquidity that was borrowed into existence. Half of all the money that's walking around the streets nowadays was printed in 2020. Yeah, they'll print some more money. We know that, but I don't see a rosy picture for a lot of these assets, Joe. You better have a company that's actually performing. And unfortunately, big companies are the ones that perform. They smash the smaller ones, Joe. And who's proud of owning the biggest stocks, the biggest companies, right? It's kind of icky feeling sometimes.
When we get back, another nation has announced they're going to the BRICS. I'll tell you who it is when we get back. 800-951-0592. Joe and Jason here on this Wednesday. Our markets are closed today. Probably good that they are. As news from Japan's 5th largest bank and then the Congressional Budget Office slapping another $400 billion onto the debt. Of course, they're probably light still another $400 billion, but we'll watch how that plays out. We've had great low premiums. I mean, being able to buy really close to spot. They never last long. I don't know how much longer we'll see prices. Premiums went up yesterday. We'll see how they react. But today I got a great opportunity. I've got 80 $20 Saints. They're going to be $2,475 on these $20 St. Gaudens pre-1933. So remember, the Saints, they came after the liberties. America had become a superpower. Teddy Roosevelt didn't think the Liberty, the side profile of Lady Liberty's face was majestic enough. Right? He thought that, God, these other ones, like the British sovereign or the French franc or the German, he thought those coins looked better. And he wanted, America's now the power. We need something impressive. And they came up with the Saints and the Indians, the St. Gaudens, why they call it the St. Gaudens. The artist who designed the coin actually died right before the coin was going to be released. His name was Augustus St. Gaudens, and so they named the coin the St. Gaudens coin, $2,475. Jason, great value, and especially when you start thinking about, okay, wait a minute. Now we've had another big foreign bank having to take massive losses on top of, this fairy tale myth about the debt just went away because the CBO just said, okay, you know what, we were wrong. We don't know how to count very well. How's another $400 billion onto the debt going to look? And I think, again, as we talk about this bubble here being so concentrated on just these handful of stocks, we don't know which domino it's going to be, but there's a lot of dominoes lining up. Any one of them could trigger a run here.
I agree with that too, Joe. I mean, you're hitting a good points on several things you've been bringing today. I can't say enough about these gold coins. That if you have the means, you should be jumping into this right now. I mean, Joe, what was that price one more time on these things?
$2,475.
It's not going to get cheaper. Gold does ebb and flow. It does go up. It does go down. But if you look at a long enough timeline, you look at inflation, and then gold will just go with it. I've heard some people, Joe, and I know that you have to put a little time and effort into gold, and it's easy to understand once you get it down, but people look at it too much like every other investment out there. Yeah. And I hear too many people say, well, gold's really high, I don't want to buy it, and then watch it crash down to half price, and if you're listening and you're not as experienced with gold, you got to not look at it in such a manner. You need to ask yourself. I usually ask people that are really worried about the price of gold. There's one major thing to look at. Through your entire life, have the price of goods and services gone down? And I'm not talking about electronics and technology. I'm talking about average goods, services, gasoline, food, energy, housing. Have any of those things gone down as a trend, as like a yearly or even a multi-year trend? And the answer is no, because inflation's built into this economic system, and gold will simply, being one of those things, will go up in price like your food, like your rent. I mean, Joe, how much? I remember renting a 3-bedroom apartment in 1996. I think it was $600. Right, it wasn't the best apartment. It was
3 bedrooms, right?
3-bedroom apartment, $600. Gold has gone up at the same rate. I bet that apartment's probably $2,000 a month, and your gold is now much more than it was priced in 1996, Joe.
Yeah, and again, to Jason's point, when I started doing this, gold was $300, and it's ebbed and flowed. But the thing that's really hard and why we're talking about there's going to be a massive move. Gold was 300 when the debt was 5 trillion, and they were still talking about balanced budgets. They were still talking about, oh no, we can pay this off, right? We just need to get the economy a little bit better and we can pay this thing off. It's now 35 trillion. In the Congressional Budget Office, which can't even count to 10, okay, says in the next 10 years, it's going to be 57 trillion. And I laughed and told you that would be a miracle. Right? If that actually happened, we'd have to call that a miracle. It's not happening. It's going to be 70 trillion. And I think for most people, that's the hard part to understand. Right? We are going to see gold prices so much higher than this, and all the banks know it. Everybody knows it. What about yesterday? The World Gold Council. I've never, ever seen so many central banks saying, we're going to be buying gold. Over 30% of them this year alone. Over 70% of them will say they're going to be buying gold between now and the next 5 years. And guess what they all said? Well, not all. 70% of them said, by the way, we're dumping dollars to do it. $20 saying God is $2,475. 800-951-0592. We're going to wrap it up right after this. 800-951-0592. $20 St. Gaudens, $2,475 today. And if the news could get any worse, after Saudi Arabia, Iran, Ethiopia, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates all join the BRICS. Malaysia is now saying they are going to be joining the BRICS nation as well. They've made the decision. We'll be placing the formal procedures in soon. We are just awaiting the results. And Jason, the BRICS has already said there's a line of 40 to 50 other countries that have said that they have applied for BRICS membership. Malaysia now the first to say, hey, we're one of them. And by the way, we're ready, right? We're ready to join. And I think you're going to see more of this. And what have we seen from these BRICS nations? They buy gold and they sell dollars. They buy gold and they sell dollars. Look at Saudi Arabia. They joined BRICS, 3-4 months ago, something like that? What did they do this week? Oh, that's right. Hey, we're going to end the dollar for oil thing. We're going to go to the Bank of International Settlements payment system, which will allow us to accept anything for oil, right? These are the things that we're seeing. Malaysia, they've already started buying gold already. It's almost like a precursor, right? Hey, all of a sudden, the country starts buying gold, and you got to almost believe that, okay, it looks like maybe these one to be these countries that wants to get into the BRICS.
How many times have you heard anybody talk about gold say that you buy it to hedge, right? Yeah, you buy it to hedge. Well, I mean, you hedge against the dollar. I mean, and these countries, they deal in treasuries, the world reserve currency. They all have done it. They have automobiles. Most likely they were on the petrodollar at some level. And everything that you're bringing about these foreign countries and these central banks show buying gold in the levels not seen before. It's a hedge. They're just hedging. I have a feeling a lot of these countries have no idea. Their leadership has no idea what's going to happen with the dollar. They probably still feel like it's still going to be great, but world events are happening, things are happening, and it's like, well, maybe we should put at least a third into gold, maybe 2/3 in these treasuries. We'll put at least a third in gold, and then there's other countries going much deeper than that, and a lot of hedging going on, Joe.
Lots of it. How about, Putin's in North Korea? They just signed a military pact. Israel now saying it's going to go into Lebanon. I mean, right? Yeah, there's a lot of stuff happening today. I mean, of course, it makes sense, right? Oh, the markets are closed. Let's everybody announce all this stuff today, so we can pass over it. But Jason, there's a lot of reasons to be hedging, and like I said, there's so many dominoes. We just don't know which domino is going to cause all the other dominoes to fall. And the problem is, the more dominoes you get, sooner or later, someone's going to knock one over.
It has the feeling that somewhere the whole table of dominoes is going to be flipped over. That's the feel it has, right? You knock over a few here and there for a couple of years, then suddenly someone comes over and just knocks the whole table over.
It's like me playing board games with my brothers, right? And you know you're going to lose, and you just say, I quit! And you just throw it all up in the air. Make sure you got that gold put away before someone throws it all up in the air. 800-951-0592. $20 St. Gaudens. $2,475.